We're officially recording. Next, Sarah Jenkins, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Jenkins. I oversee the outreach and education work that we do at the Fair Housing Council. We are a statewide organization that assists people who've experienced housing discrimination. And the work that I oversee is involved with educating both consumers and providers and just the community in general about fair housing rights and responsibilities.
Perfect. Thank you. And Isabella.
Hi, everyone. I'm Isabella Devine. I'm Program Services Coordinator 2 at the Council with Sarah. I'm based in our Madison office, and my work focuses is in between outreach and education and our enforcement program. So I specifically do complaint intake.
Great. Thank you. I'm just going to take a moment to make you co-hosts so you can share your screen.
That's an automatic setting they can share.
All right. Well, let's get started. We're here today because one of the top priorities identified by the Housing Advisory Committee for the Regional Housing Strategy is to provide housing, resources, and protections for the most vulnerable populations. The Housing Advisory Committee also identified equity as one of the RHS's 6 core values. They defined equity as historically excluded populations and lower income households have access to quality housing. In response to that, last year, Dane County planning staff presented the first installation in a program called How to Make Your Community More Welcoming to People of Color. This program is a continuation of implementing the regional housing strategy priorities. We're very excited to have 3 presenters today. We'll start by hearing from Bridget Van Bellingham, Dane County Senior Planner, about Prejudice in Places, which is an effort to identify, map, and denounce discriminatory covenants for properties across Dane County. Next, we'll hear from Sarah Alvarado, co-founder of Own It, Building Black Wealth, about the important programs and services that they provide. And last, we'll hear about fair housing rights and resources from Sarah Jenkins, Program Administrator, and Isabella Devine, Program Services Coordinator 2, from the Metropolitan Milwaukee Fair Housing Council and their satellite office in Madison, the Fair Housing Center of Greater Madison. Throughout the presentations, please continue to put your questions in the chat and we'll save them for the Q&A at the end of the presentations. Okay, I'll kick us off by handing it off to Bridget.
You want me to share my slides?
Yes, please.
Okay. How's that? Okay, great. So thanks everyone for coming today. I'm excited to share this project with you. To be completely forthright, I sort of inherited the sexy part of the project and all of the hard work was done in the years before me. So I could not go on without saying the project was inspired by work all over the places. Olivia, I believe, brought a huge motivation to the department in getting the project off the ground. And then since then, records and support have been digging through deeds and mapping all the data, and now I get to bring it out to the public. So I just want to give a big thank you to people who worked on this in the past. This is a very collaborative project, which has been really great, not only within our own department of planning, but it's been involved other offices within Dane County, and now our reach is going beyond Dane County, and I'll talk a little bit more about Dane County government and staff in particular. I'll talk a little bit more about that as I go along. So a little bit of history, just as a reminder, I'm sure many of you know already, but Before the 1900s, it was the wild, wild west, probably even in the East. And so in 1917, the US Supreme Court ruled discriminatory zoning as unconstitutional. So before it was done by a municipal jurisdiction and public leaders. And so when that was rendered unallowable anymore, it went to the private sector to fulfill that role. And they created these discriminatory covenants. Sometimes they had limitations of time, like 20 years, 30 years, depending on how long the funding from the mortgage holder or the lender was. No surprise, this primarily targeted Black people during the Great Migration, as many of them moved from southern states to the northern states. And in 1948, the US Supreme Court ruled that those documents were illegal, the private held ones, and unenforceable. And then in 1968, the Fair Housing Law, part of the Civil Rights Act, prevented even further on discriminatory housing practices. So I addressed this a smidge already, but our primary inspirations from the UW of Minnesota, or University of Minnesota, my apologies. And there's a list of several other on our website, so I won't go over them in detail now, but please do take a look. To kick off the project and the data collection, it was actually done by a Boys and Girls Club career paths intern, Ippolito. And so he started by looking at about 1,800 records and seeing if there was any further reason to justify looking at all the records. And so they did find several records. And as a result, once that project ended, it was turned into a more full-blown data project that you're seeing the result of today. More recently, the state in 2023 passed Act 210, and that gave the state giving local property owners the ability to also announce the deeds and fill out a form. Following that, the Dane County Board of Supervisors also passed a resolution to repudiate discriminatory covenants locally as well. And in March of 2025, the records staff finished going through 330,000 records between 1900 and 1970. And all the results of that. Oh, no, before that. So here's a little bit how we did it. Here's an old document. Sunset Village is on the west side of Madison. And this document was run through a software that turned it into this text over here in the gray box. And then the text in the gray box was search for keywords. We had about 14 to 20 different keywords that were maybe common at the time to refer to different ethnic groups, religions, etc. And then it would produce this spreadsheet. And then the spreadsheet would be taken up by a staff person, and the staff person would go confirm, verify, highlight, and link the information on the map. So now you can go to the map and click on a property and see the actual snippet of text associated with that property. So here are the results of that search. So more than 4,000 parcels are covered by these documents. About 1,100 have historically done a previous process to, repudiate the documents in like the 70s. So that takes away around 1,100. I just said that. And then the most popular places, Madison, no surprise, it's the biggest, Shorewood Hills, and Monona. And that is in large part because of when they were developing out, which ties in line with that history that I talked about at the beginning. So you can see by decade how many there were. And those 10 releases covered the 1,000 properties. So a lot of times, instead of those being individual properties, they were plats for whole neighborhoods or subdivisions. So I had one document that applied to, say, 200 houses. And those were typically the ones that have been released. Here's a sampling of all the words that we did find, of the ones that we searched, and how many occurrences there were. And as you can see, the most common phrase was members of the Caucasian race. Here's a map of the general area. Obviously, it's pretty zoomed out. You can zoom way in online and see if it applies to you or your aunt and uncle or somebody you know who lives in town. Here's a sample from Shorewood Hills, and the highlighted language there is really tiny. So here it is blown up even more. And this features the sort of Caucasian race example. So here's what we're talking about doing now, and this is very early stages. So of course, as people are releasing, so people can now release these documents through a form, and we will keep track of that as it's done. The county, of course, wants to be an early actor and convene people, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of our convening efforts in a sec. We are promoting the Dane County Historic Society Unjust Deeds display. We provide a lot of the data for that. You can go see it at a library near you. It's being featured in a different library every month. You can see that at the event I'll talk about as well. And actually, they just got a second copy, so it might be popping up in other places that I yet to be disclosed. So the city of Winona had adopted a resolution, I believe in 2022, that mirrors these efforts that have happened at the state and the county afterwards. So we're looking to these other jurisdictions to do something similar. And we want to provide opportunities for other organizations to promote their work on how to participate in restorative justice and attempts to make up for this ugly history. And in general, we want to engage the public, have a collective understanding on what this history is, and then again, use that to inspire some restorative justice actions. These areas in blue in the image on the side are those covenants, those big plat size ones that I was talking about earlier. So one of our biggest and exciting convening opportunities is this Prejudice in Places, I'm calling it like a fill and file event. If you have a property with this type of deed restriction on it, you can come fill out a form. We'll have the property professionals and legal professionals there to help you do it, get it filed. We'll collect them, and then we will take them back to our office and file them in batches. The Realtors Association is going to cover a $30 fee so long as the board resolution passes tonight. So hopefully it does. And I'm not doing some false advertising here. If you do come, or if you know anybody who wants to come, you do have to bring your photo ID so we can confirm that you are the one who owns the property, and it's at the Alliant Energy Center. Please feel free to share this with anybody. And I want to make a distinction and what release means and discharge means. And there's a note here at the bottom of the slide, but essentially the state will not allow, and the records offices don't prefer, to remove things from the historic stack of paper that affects a property. So the state does not enable us to take the language out or the documents out, but rather put a document on top that repudiates and denounces them. So the language is not necessarily clear as the state provided it, but that's what it actually means. So that's my presentation. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask, and I'll leave this up here. Here's some other examples that came from our documents. Or we'll do questions later.
Thank you, Bridget. Yes, please put any questions in the chat. Really great presentation. It's somewhat shocking to see the flagged words all together there, kind of. And we're hoping that the resolution passes tonight. So keep us posted.
Thanks.
All right. Ready for the next one. Perfect. Okay, so now we'll hear from Sarah Alvarado. Sarah Alvarado and Tiffany Malone are the co-founders of Own It, Building Black Wealth, and Sarah will be presenting today. Thank you so much, Sarah. You can take it away.
Awesome, thanks. So thank you, Bridget, for doing some of the historical context for me. Really, what we are doing with Own It is addressing the ridiculous statistics that come from Black and brown people being explicitly denied access. So the fact that since the Fair Housing Act in 1968, the gap between Black and white homeownership has increased, not decreased, is like, we understand it's happening, we see it happening, and we don't see it changing. And so a group of realtors and community members and lenders and people in the real estate community came together to really discuss what we could do from the inside within our systems. This is some information that you all probably have access to, but I'm going to keep the slides here anyway, just to this is what we see on a regular basis within the real estate industry. This is the reality, and we believe that a lot of it has to do with real estate and how wealth is accumulated through real estate. This data comes from you all, so thank you very much. We use this on a regular basis. The fact that only 13% of Black households are homeowners compared compared to the 64% of white householders is just got to change. So we think we can do a lot to change it, actually. And our mission is to do just that, increase generational wealth in Black and Brown communities, specifically through homeownership. Homeownership is a tool. It's not the only way, and it is a way that we do have ability to shift. So we do this by providing education, down payment funds with fewer restrictions, and addressing systemic racism in the real estate, banking, and financial industries. So our program is a two-part initiative. We started in 2021 as a pilot program. One City Schools was our fiscal sponsor. We just got our 501c3 in January of this year because our pilot program proved to be incredibly successful. So it's very simple. Education, free wealth building and homeownership courses, a mentorship program, and post-closing support. And then the money. Money is critical. There's not a lot of access to money. White families have a lot of access to generational wealth based on how much wealth was accumulated pre-1968, post-1968. So we offer down payment funds, and we follow the federal gift tax limit, which in 2025 is $19,000. And last year it was $18,000. When we started, it was $15,000, but that's one of the things that we feel is very important because the gift tax limit is something that is utilized a lot in generational wealth, and that's how we picked that money or that amount for the grant. So this is a little snapshot, and I can get into the weeds on a lot of it, but I'm going to keep it very high level. The education program, there's a couple of points that I want to make about it. And then there's the down payment grants, which can get very in the weeds because down payment assistance, which we do not call our program assistance, it is a grant because we are modeling family gifting. We have to call it a grant, but it is not assistance. It is access to funds that have been denied systematically. So we are unapologetic about what we're doing, and we have found a way to be in compliance with the fair housing laws. So I can get into that. And then our model does have a fund producing model, and that is how we partner with the local realtors, brokers, banks, credit unions, because we do believe that our industries need to own up to harm caused. And it's history, it's not happening currently, but there's still a lot of discrimination. There's still a lot of policies and practices that are happening current day. And the more we're aware of it, the more we can change it. So the education program, to keep it simple, we have a wealth building course, 6 weeks, and it's free, it's online, it is at your own pace. There's homework, and then there's an assessment process, so the families can upload their information in terms of credit, budgeting, goals, and once they go through the readiness assessment process, then there's a conversation with mentors about the homeownership course. Sometimes people will take the wealth building course, and then 2-3 years later, they'll come back and take the homeownership course. Homeownership is a long game, and we want to make it easy and accessible and supportive. So once somebody gets their wealth building certificate, they can come back later and take the homeownership course. The homeownership course includes a mentorship program as well, and that offers wraparound support, resources, and connections. And then after closing, I mean, once you get into the house, it doesn't mean that you know everything. There's a lot that needs to happen once homeownership begins and how to build equity, etc. We also offer a free financial review 1 year post-closing, and our curriculum incorporates a racial justice framework and is Black and Brown led, which is incredibly critical because a lot of the wealth building education that we have found isn't always acknowledging how the system itself was set up. So this is some feedback that we've received from some of the participants. This is will be available for people, right? I think people can have this slideshow later.
Right.
In terms of funding, access to money, it's one of the biggest barriers, period. And down payment assistance programs are great. We've worked with the city of Madison to learn what works and what doesn't work. And that's basically how we created our down payment grant program. And the Fair Housing Act actually is what created a problem and a barrier for us when we wanted to be unapologetic about specifically funding Black and brown families, because it is illegal to offer race-based funding at this point. And until that changes, we did figure out a way to address that, which I will get to in a second. So understanding down payment assistance is really important when we're looking at this, because if you're a seller and you have a realtor who's presenting 4 or 5 offers to you, and one of them is a cash offer, one of them is maybe 20% down regular financing, and then another offer has a down payment assistant contingency on it, meaning the funds aren't going to be available until after the financing goes through. Sometimes there's sales price limitations, sometimes there's additional inspections and testing. So the realtor is presenting these offers and the seller is looking at them. And a lot of times you'll hear the conversation is that here's how we're looking at your offers. This one is XYZ, this one is XYZ, and this one has a down payment assistant. This is a riskier offer. So where we used to have risky neighborhoods based on redlining, we now have risky offers based on where money comes from. And it technically might be riskier, but that's super problematic because it takes a lot for families to get actually approved for down payment assistance, to get to that point where they finally found a house, they found a realtor that's going to help them, they found a lender who understands the down payment assistance programming, and then to be consistently getting rejected once they get their offers to the table. Like, these are where we're consistently seeing barriers. So our question was, how can we remove all of these restrictions, which is basically what we did. So the families go through the education program. Once they've completed it, then they apply for the down payment fund. We award them the fund or the money. So they get a letter. That money is then earmarked in their name for 1 year. So it's not contingent upon, it's earmarked for them as they search for a home. When they write their offer, they don't have any additional contingencies. Nobody knows where the money's coming from. It shouldn't matter. And then prior to close, those funds are transferred directly to the title company. So then it goes directly into the equity of the home. So that's how it's worked. And the only restrictions we do have based on 501c3 rules is that it's specific for first-time home buyers who haven't owned in the past 3 years, and the real estate must be owner occupied. So either a single family home, a condo, a townhouse, a duplex, no multi, nothing more than 2 units. And the other, I'm not going to say restriction, but in terms of where we can offer our programs is based on our community partnerships. So this is where we got strategic, and it's within our community partnerships that gives us the ability to make our program and our funding available to all families at One City Schools and staff. So we are in compliance with the fair housing rules, all staff at Anesis Therapy and all staff at Centro of Dane County. Knowing that the majority of those families and staff members are families of color. And at this point, One City Schools was our pilot. We just recently expanded to Centro and Anesis Therapy, and we've had a significant increase in the families who are taking the courses. Because the question really came down to, what would it look like if the community became the family wealth that Black and brown families have been denied? And then that begs the question of, where does the money come from? How do we raise $1 million in how many years is it? 4 years? We have an ambassador program. So this is how the real estate industry is acknowledging harm caused through historical and current policies. It's basically realtors, lenders, homeowner insurance, agencies, banks, they're committing to contributing a portion or a percentage of their earnings at the time of closing to the down payment fund. That's how it becomes a fund producing model. We have sellers who at the time of closing, maybe they listed their house for $600,000, they got 5 offers, they sold it for $680,000. Those sellers are contributing sometimes $1,000, sometimes $15,000 at closing to the down payment fund. We have churches who are contributing money. But this ambassador program really showcases how our industry is ready to do something, because we haven't seen it from the government. This is really exciting. We've had 19 families use the grants to purchase homes. That's more than $4.8 million of real estate that is Black and Brown owned at this point through our program. These numbers are in the process of increasing right now, but that's where we're at. This woman right here, Raji, in the corner with her 2 kids, she recently, after 3 years, sold her first condo and bought another house, a bigger house. So she's using the system the way it's meant to be used in terms of increasing wealth. We have a lot of families who had applied for or had gone to the bank to get pre-approved and were denied, and then just didn't know what to do next. So really creating a community of how do I get to where I want to go and not just stop the process once I get a no. It's been really game changing for families. We have families who make a significant amount of money, but they just don't have the down payment money, and then they don't qualify for other down payment assistance. Doesn't mean that they shouldn't be owning homes and building wealth through that. So what we're doing next is we're looking at building and growing. We're looking at creating a national model. We want to increase the number of families that we can serve. And we really want more people who understand how the system has completely failed Black and Brown families to have a way of easily giving to the down payment fund. And there is Tiffany and I. We have a very multiracial team. We've got a board, we've got an advisory council, we have a ton of volunteers. We have a website, which is beautiful, and you can sign up for our newsletter. And if you have questions, you can ask me at the end of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Sarah. What an important model. I have one quick question. I'm just wondering, is there a link to the ambassador program in case people want to share that or?
Yep, it's
work
on our
with-
website. There's it says ambassadors and there's an interest form. So
Okay.
anyone can sign up for that. And then the brokerages are being really supportive in offering a way for their realtors specifically. So the minute the check comes in, the broker actually cuts the check on behalf of the agent to make it simple. We have Lake Ridge Bank, who has joined as an agency ambassador. So they systematically contribute a dollar amount based on every single closing and refinance. Every single month they send us a check that's systematic. So like it can be, it's like going to the grocery store and you up it $1 for XYZ at the time of closing. This is something that can be implemented very easily.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. For our final presentation today, I'd like to introduce Sarah Jenkins and Isabella Devine, who will be presenting on their work with the Fair Housing Center of Greater Madison. So I will hand it off to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Isabella Devine. I'm Program Services Coordinator 2 at the Fair Housing Center of Greater Madison. I'm here today with my colleague, Sarah Jenkins. I'll be presenting, but Sarah will be here to help answer questions at the end of our presentation. So I'm gonna just go ahead and jump right in. So first, I'm just going to describe who we are. So we are a private nonprofit civil rights enforcement agency, and in Madison, we were founded in 1998. But we are a satellite office in Madison, and our Metropolitan Milwaukee Fair Housing Council was established in 1977. And we do operate another satellite office in Appleton, though we do serve statewide. And our mission is to combat illegal housing discrimination and create and maintain racially and economically integrated housing patterns throughout Wisconsin. And we're able to do this through our 4 main programs, the first of which is our enforcement program. This includes complaint intake, so when someone feels that they've been discriminated against in any part of housing, they can call our office. And it also includes our testing programs. So we offer on a case-by-case basis, we offer testing to help enforce, to help prove that discrimination has happened. We also have our outreach and education program, which is what we're doing here today, informing people of what their rights are under the law. And then we have our fair lending program and our inclusive communities program. So now I'm going to go through what people's protections are under the law. So an individual has the right to not be treated differently based on their belonging in one of these groups. So one or more, sorry, of these groups. So we have race, color, national origin, so the country where someone's from, religion, sex, which includes sexual harassment, and instances of quid pro quo, so the exchange of a sexual favor in for something else, for example, for a lowered rent amount. We also have disability. This includes both physical and mental impairments that substantially limit one or more major life activities. This can also include emotional support animals and service animals, and accommodations and modifications such as adding a grab bar to your shower or installing a ramp in the front of your building. And then we also have familial status, and familial status is the presence of children in the home. So children would be anyone 18 or under, and it also covers pregnant women. So now we'll get into what is protected at the state level. So we have marital status, age. This typically affects people who are older or younger. We have ancestry, lawful source of income. So this includes any source of income that is lawful should be considered as a form of your income. And so this can include disability benefits, and alimony, anything that is a legal source of income. The only thing that is not included here is Section 8 rent assistance. We also have sexual orientation and domestic abuse and sexual assault and stalking victims are also protected under state law. And next, I'm going to go through some protections that occur at the city and county level. So any of the protected classes that you see here that have an asterisk next to them are only in the city of Madison. All the rest are in all of Dane County. I'm not going to go through all of these just because we would be here all day if I went through all of them. But I'm going to touch on some of the more common ones that we see. So for example, one that is important to point out is gender identity. This is a protection at the county level. We also have citizenship status. So if someone is a citizen or not a citizen, they are protected under the law. And then also homelessness or a state of being unhoused, you also have protections under the law. And finally, one of the main ones that we see is complaints of unsafe or unsanitary housing conditions in the city of Madison. So if someone files a complaint against their housing provider for unsafe housing conditions, they can't be retaliated against for filing that complaint. So that is a protection that individuals have. So now we're going to talk about some red flags of housing discrimination. I appreciate Sarah and Bridget for bringing up some really useful information in those first two presentations that ties into this information. So some things just to look out for when individuals are looking for housing is if they're being told that nothing is available, but they continue to see a property advertised. So this could look like if an individual goes to rent an apartment and they're told, nothing's available and they, walk away, but then later on they continue to see it advertised on the website. That could be a possible red flag of discrimination in the sense that they could be pre-screening or screening people out based on their membership in a protected class. Something we also like to call attention to, just in general, in any stage of the housing process, is if your phone calls aren't being returned. Again, someone could be pre-screening you out based on the sound of your voice. Additionally, if you're given confusing or contradictory information, that could potentially be a red flag of discrimination. And another example is if you're told your family can only reside on the first floor in a building. So this would be discrimination based on familial status in the sense that It's making families live in one particular area of the building, and so therefore segregating families from the rest of the rest of the people in the building. If you're only showing units that are in disrepair or not high quality units, that could be a potential red flag. And then additionally, if you're told terms or conditions that seem especially strict or unusual, especially if they're related to your race, to your religion, to any membership in one of those classes that I described earlier, those things could potentially be seen as discriminatory. And then if you're given a discount or not given a discount and you see that it's being advertised, but you yourself are not offered that discount, that could be a possible flag. And then finally, we see non-renewal or the eviction of many tenants at the same time. And so if we see, all Black tenants are being evicted from a complex, or they're not receiving renewals, but all the white tenants are, that could potentially be discriminatory as well. And one thing I just want to mention that I didn't get to mention before was that when it comes to our office, the most common complaint that we receive is related to disability. So our highest intake volume is cases related to disability, but we also do see a high amount of race-related complaints. And so discrimination is often very subtle these days. It often comes as someone saying something's not available or just not showing up to a meeting. So we like to inform people that if something feels weird, then they should maybe call our office and discuss it with us, because it's a potential that discrimination was happening, even if someone didn't say specifically that they didn't want to rent to a person of color. And I totally just lost my train of thought, but yes, that's all I have for you today. This is how you reach us. So we do have a toll-free complaint intake line that we do serve statewide. And you can also reach us online or through social media. And one thing I want to encourages you to call us and ask us questions. All of our services are confidential and they are free to people who call. So even if you just have a question, we're happy to answer that.
Thank you so much, Isabella. I appreciate it. Please put any questions into the chat. Those red flags of discrimination were very subtle. I have a question for you. I'm wondering, do you have an estimate of how often these cases go unreported? Like, how much are we not seeing?
Yeah, so I can't give you exact numbers, but there's a lot that goes unreported. So we know our office handles a lot of complaints in a year, but it's just a fraction of what's really happening. Some of that is, why we do outreach, right? People just aren't aware of what their rights are under the law. Also, there are housing providers who aren't aware the Fair Housing Act exists, and then will sometimes accidentally, discriminate based on protections under the act. And sometimes it's intentional, right? So again, we see just a fraction of what's out there. And that's why we see it as so important of informing people of what their rights are, just to have in their back pocket in case in the future, something does come up. Sarah, I'm not sure if there's anything you want to add there. Sarah, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. So I know the National Fair Housing Alliance will publish data nationally on housing discrimination complaints. And I think they usually estimate that, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's like they estimate that there's 4 million instances of discrimination across the country every year, but the number of complaints that actually get filed are obviously much, much lower than that for many of the reasons that Isabella already stated, either because it's so subtle, people don't even maybe recognize that it's happening, or they they don't know where to turn for help, or they're afraid of retaliation, or in situations, especially right now, we're in such a tight housing market that sometimes people just want to move on and find a place to live, right? And don't necessarily have the time to engage in the complaint process, which can be quite, in some cases, quite lengthy and complex.
Yeah, and just to build off of that last point Sarah made, oftentimes we have people who are dealing with a whole lot of issues all at once. And so we are very focused on our area and we can assist with our area, but people often also have consumer protection reports or the tenant resource center. They have a lot of other things going on. And sometimes they need to take care of those things before they can report fair housing or housing discrimination. So we try to work with clients and provide them with options and provide referral resources if necessary. But sometimes that's why complaints don't get filed, just because there's a lot of other things on their mind as well.
Thank you for that. It's really interesting. I'm going to go ahead and read the questions that we did receive in the chat. Start with the question for Bridget. Does the mapping project include any efforts to look at the correlation between racially restrictive covenants of the past and present day racial segregation?
I mean, anecdotally, I would suggest that it worked in concert with the historic zoning that was already taking place and other factors of just a relatively racist society at the time. But I have sought that out with UW researchers and have since joined the National Research Coalition on Covenants, hoping to get some more interest there. And also there are other questions to say about the data, like I mentioned the sunset provision in one. Like, was that in every single one? Was there a certain creator of covenants, author that did that, or a certain lender that did that? There's other questions in all of that text that we could answer or look into. So I was talking with Professor Timmons in the business school and the housing and also Rhiannon George in applied economics, ag economics, and then Rebel Sims at UW. And we applied for a WRF grant. It was before the data was all the way done, and so it was denied. You may consider reapplying for that, but otherwise look for other funding to do similar proposals now that we have the data set complete. So if anybody knows anybody that would be interested in picking it up, of course, please let me know. We're happy to share it, make it available. It is already available in the UW mapping resources library. So it's not like there's no gatekeeping of the data. It is all there. But we haven't necessarily answered all of those questions that I just mentioned in that data set. So there might be other questions that we could look for and materialize. And then the other component of that is study, maybe that's it. But hopefully something will come of that.
Sarah, I will share that there is widespread evidence of the impacts of racial segregation, history of racial segregation on community character, makeup, location, yeah, all over throughout the country. But there's research, there's anecdotal evidence, and it doesn't take that much effort to actually find it in our own communities. I live on the north side, the poor areas are predominantly people of color. Certainly here on the south side, there was a whole effort to, dislodge people of color from housing and segregate them. And there's, evidence just looking around the city, in general, but there is a lot of research about that, so.
Thank you both. Next question is to Sarah Alvarado. How do you see inequitable access to credit impacting racial disparities in home ownership?
The credit system has a lot of racism embedded in it. So how we see it showing up today is, well, a lot of it is uneducation or lack of education. So that's there isn't a huge push for community at large, for people in general to understand how credit works and how to work the system. And if you're not working the system, it's working you. So in terms of Black and Brown communities, where there has been significant, I would say, I guess just going back to the explicitness of denying access and education. So the less that people understand how to work it, then the less available it is. So we see it a lot. We see credit issues. We see it's really easy for your credit to go down. It's really hard for your credit to go up. I mean, that's for anyone, right? But there are studies around the racism embedded in it, not and within the tax system too. The appraisal system was built on racism. So it's in every single system that is part of real estate in general. So how to access real estate, you have to be able to work all of those areas. And that's why we really, really want to push for the education around it, because we're not trying to get people into homes. Like there's no point in getting someone into a home if they're not going to understand how to be able to keep it, right? And that's why for us, income is really critical. So this whole concept of low income grants for down payment assistance, what about medium to high income earners having access to be able to build wealth through home ownership? Like I feel like that's where a lot of wealth is built. So there's like 80 different tangents I could go on, but hopefully that answered your question, Sarah. Or was it more specific that you had?
Yeah, well, I was just curious because I mean, I am aware of how, some of the inequities in credits, but specifically, I was thinking more about just like the system itself, like the inequities in the system itself. Like, for example, you could have one person who makes $1,000 mortgage payment a month, and that counts towards your credit, and then somebody else who's making $1,000 a month rent payment, that doesn't count towards your credit. And if there are racial disparities in home ownership, then that system in and of itself is going to have racial disparities baked into it if we are considering homeowners to be creditworthy and renters to not be creditworthy.
100%. Yep. Utilities, like so many things.
Yeah, and I think the system, like you said, is skewed that way, but so much of what we see, which is systemic and systematic, is that we don't have people of color in the lending and the credit fields, right? We don't have, when you look at the racial disparities in housing and homeownership in just Dane County, 64% of white people are household owners, 13% are Black households, and that number's going down. And so, right, if you don't have that model, right?
And the representation, right? Like if there aren't Black and Brown lenders and realtors as well, I think that this whole concept of trust, like why would people trust systems that have harmed? And there's a push for how can we make communities of color trust us? And I think that's the wrong question. It's how can we do things differently to earn trust, but to actually go request trust when there's no reason for it. Even though I work in the system, I'm not going to just assume that somebody should trust me. So I really am hoping that the agencies, the banks and the financial industries can shift how they think about what it will take to build trust. It's not just relationships, it's changing the system.
But I do think that's one of the reasons that your model is so important. And I mean, it's just, you're filling a gap, which is actually more like a cavern, because when you consider only 13% of families, Black households in this county, the kids are growing up with parents who are actually paying a mortgage and seeing how to balance budgets and hear them talk about the various household insurance and costs for replacing a heater and all of those things that you just hear anecdotally your whole life and you grow up with that.
Yep.
I mean, that's a huge gap, 13 to 64. So it's what is it called when you're just sort of being railroaded into one direction because by lack of information and lack of understanding. So Own It is really providing a very unique resource in its outreach, in its capacity, and its representation of multicultural society, which we are. So thank you.
Yeah, generational wealth isn't just money. It's like you said, it's, you know, when you're at the dining room table eating dinner at night and someone's talking about the lender and the interest rate and et cetera, that's all part of what you know can be possible. So gotta start somewhere.
Right. And you hear about, education and awareness, but something I haven't heard is the mentorship program that you have, which that really stands out, I think, too, in terms of this conversation. Yeah, if you
Yeah,
could
we
expand
look
on
at how wraparound services, YWCA, Bayview, is that what it's called? Bayview there, yeah. It's who do you call when you don't, when your lender isn't calling you back? Is this normal? Is this not normal? Like how, if you don't have that community that you grew up in that has home ownership experience, who are the people that are going to be able to support you? I mean, we've had people say, oh, I was denied a pre-approval. Like I went in to apply for a loan and I was denied. Okay, when was that? 5 years ago. What have you done since then? Well, nothing. I was denied. So who are the people saying you were denied that one day? So what needs to happen for you to go back in 3 months or 1 year and get, or who else can you talk to? But these are all missing conversations. And the community really can be doing better to create more conversations that will, people don't like to talk about money in general, right? So we also need to change our culture about talking about money, so that it's not just bad stories, because a lot of them are bad stories. Oh, I lost my home. My parents lost their home growing up. Okay, what about the good stories? You don't hear white people talking about, oh yeah, my parents gave me down payment money to get into my first home. Nobody talks about that really. So the mentorship program is critical. We need big brothers and sisters to help us through tough stuff.
One thing I've thought about a lot over the years is, this idea, right? You just mentioned big brothers and big sisters, this idea that, maybe we should start introducing kids in high school, and
Yeah.
even grammar school, right? Or whatever, like, making it, age appropriate, but this idea that, this opportunity is open for you now, we're obviously a high value county. We have lots of barriers for just the average person to get into a home because of our prices and the lack of housing. But even still, setting an example at a very early age that this is a possibility, um, yeah, whether it's, through financial literacy training for young people or, any variety of things. But, I did some financial literacy training for young people when I was involved in, uh, market development for local foods, and they just ate that up, when they figured out they could, just look at a spreadsheet and see what things cost and what they could charge and what their, basic bottom line would be at the end of a day at the market. And I just feel like there'd be opportunities for that in terms of housing and the future of housing, or at least setting, a goal or an inspiration for young folks. So
Well, I'll just add that, I feel like we have to go back to, the times when the Black community or the minority communities were strong here in the United States. And I hate to say it, but there was large Black ownership, home ownership
Oh,
during
yeah.
segregation. And, not going back to that, but we have to understand the reasons why there were large home ownerships during those times. Right now, you're dealing with a community, and I'm one of those people that came out of that community, that you're in survival mode. You hear about going to college, but your reality is I'm probably not going to go because I can't afford to go. So, and then growing up in the South, where the majority of the people I knew own homes. So coming up to the Midwest and to the North, I was shocked that people that looked like me were in apartments all over the place. So that surprised me. So there's a demographic issue that's not being discussed as well. So even though we have, or the perceptions of the South as being very discriminatory, what gets overlooked sometimes is even in the midst of that, we own homes, we own property. We were entrepreneurs because we had to be our own plumbers. We had to be our own accountants. And when you're looking at communities that don't see reflections of themselves in this process, then, it's easy for you to say, hey, trust me, but I don't see reflections of myself. And how do I know that you have me, have my best interest at heart? And how do I know you're not trying to take advantage of me to get as much commission as you can from me in order to get this home? And then you're putting me in a home that you know I can't afford, that I'm probably going to have struggle with, and I'm probably going to be out of, in 3 to 5 years. So is really home ownership what you wanted from me, or is it dollars? So those are the things that, this group and our organization is struggling with, is how do we get past those things, and how do we create spaces where the information, keyword, the information is accurate, the information is we can trust that information, and there's a pathway clearly to home ownership. Because what also is getting lost is a lot of people that come out of my community, we don't know the process, we don't know the information, we're winging it all the way up to buying it. We're winging it. I was one of those. I had to learn from owning a home, and thank God that I had solid people behind me to help give me up the par. But the majority of us don't have that. And I lived in Minnesota, where I saw a number of people buying and getting into bad loans. And when the market crashed, I saw a lot of those people losing homes, credit tore up, and now are still in apartments. And when you talk about a home to them, they have a bad taste. So I just wanted to share that with my colleagues here, and ask that as we're trying to come up with solutions, that we think of those things.
Cedric, that's such a great point. Thank you for those insights. I really appreciate it. It just makes me think that maybe we should have an annual, meeting, couple of hours for people of color, for that, who want to get into housing, or for the housing industry, whether it's, people of color or realtors or bankers, or, just so, we can help engender that group to build, community and network, and, see and recognize each other. And yeah, maybe it's a, home buyer roundtable there, maybe there's, a few 20-minute segments of, what is a down payment, just some basic stuff. And then realtors and, bankers who are people of color, sitting down and having, conversations with people who are interested. Or I don't know, I'm just, thinking out loud. I'm just inspired by your vision there. So
Thank you.
maybe
I
we
would
should,
just say pathways.
yeah,
What we're doing here is we're meeting, we say we're going to meet you where you're at, right?
right,
But even with home ownership, you got to meet people where they are and say, okay,
right.
I want to own a home. So what do I need to do? Because now I'm trusting you.
Mhm.
What's the pathway to me getting there?
Right.
And having someone like the colleagues that are on this call be honest with us. Well, right now you're not there. This is where we need you to be. But here are the simple processes that we can help you with to get you here.
Yeah.
It's going to be a while. This is, in reality, it's going to take this amount of time. In reality, you're going to have to do these things. But if
Yeah.
you trust me, we can get you here. So when people have a clear pathway to not only get the home, but they also understand that you're educating them on how to keep the home. Keyword, not just getting in, which
Right.
I see a lot of programs designed to get you into the home. But what
Mhm.
I don't see is a lot of programming designed to keep you in the home. And when you find something that incorporates those two things, then you find someone that's going to be happy, from my opinion, and you find the potential applicant that's going to keep it. And that's going to add positive things to the community in terms of people that look like me owning homes, but it's the keyword, inspiring others that come out of the same situation that they're in, that they can do it too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's continue this conversation. I think there's some opportunity here for something to happen, for another step to be taken, for us to potentially, develop that community of practice, of people of color, of a safe place for, to engender more of this, these pathways, yeah. Duly noted. Thank you. Great idea.
Yeah, thank you, Cedric. Also expanding resources for existing homeowners to maintain their homes. I think you make a great point there. How can we make sure that people who need that are accessing that? Okay, we're at time, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Are there any last pressing questions or?
Comments? Aspirations?
Okay, not seeing any. Thank you all. Thank you to our presenters. This was really wonderful and really helpful. And thank you to our participants for engaging in the conversation. We appreciate it.
Hopefully we'll see you all in a couple of weeks at the Regional Housing Strategy annual meeting, and or join Bridget and others on June 17th. I think that is at the Atlanta Energy Center also. Yeah, okay. Yeah, hope to see you soon, all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
That was a very nice session. Very nice session.
Great.
Oh,
Yeah.
wait, turn off the